Why are we still dealing with those things? When I have a neighbor that's still flying the Confederate flag in their garage, but I see it every day. I think about what Nelson Mandela said as far as, education being the greatest thing to, enhance and educate, us about, what goes on in the world. And for me, that started very, very early in life. One of the first incidents I can remember as far as racism goes was when I was 5 years old in a town called Midway, Alabama. And I had an individual actually trying to run me off the road, not having to be walking, trying to run me off the road on his motorcycle and called me the N-word. And, at that particular time, being so young and all, that had a major impact, on my life and all. And some of the things that I saw back then were significant because, I was born in the 50s. So, I grew up in the 60s and 70s in a town where at that particular time, you had a statue that was right in the middle of town that was a Confederate soldier, statues that are being torn down now. You go to the doctor's office and there's two separate entrances and one is labeled color and the other is labeled white. There was something wrong with that picture. The whites in that community, although, they had certain laws and things on that line, they actually built a private school so their children would not have to go to the same school. When you see things like that taking place, it makes you wonder about, our society as a whole. However, the good part was that it never impacted me in such a way that I held any grievances against any, race, nationality, or anything in that line. I had just come back from Europe and I was in North Dakota and I had flown back down. I stopped over in Jackson, Mississippi to spend the night and everything. Well, I left Jackson, Mississippi that morning, heading back to North Dakota. And at that particular time, it was no big deal, to pick up a hitchhiker. So I saw this guy hitchhiking. I said, yeah, sure, pick him up, He was, a white guy. Picked him up and, we're riding along, we're talking and everything. And as I'm driving along, all of a sudden, I noticed there was this state trooper car that was following me. And he followed me for quite some distance, so being in law enforcement myself, this was most unusual. And next thing I know, all of a sudden, I'm surrounded and being pulled over. And there are police officers with shotguns aimed at the car and everything. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what did this guy that I just picked up do? Instead, they were focused on me because an individual who happened to be African American had robbed a bank in Jackson, Mississippi. So guess what? I was the ideal candidate for them to pull me over. I'm telling them, hey, look at here's my credentials and all. I'm also in law enforcement. I also happen to have a weapon in the car at the time, which was permitted. It was probably several hours later they finally were able, to release me and everything. When I left that police station, I never stopped until I crossed the Mississippi line, and I was targeting North Dakota as fast as I could. So that just goes to show you, how, things can happen. And then, as recently as just a couple of years ago, I happened to be in Alabama, down to Mobile, and all of a sudden I see this police officer pull me over. And I'm like, what does he pull me over? And he says, well, sir, you were weaving across the road and everything. And I'm thinking to myself, no, I was pulling over as a courtesy, as we do in Texas. And I think the only thing that he was pretty courteous, I will admit that. However, I think the thing that persuaded him that maybe this wasn't such a good idea to pull me over was I had a 140-pound Doberman in the back that he was definitely not one to be messed with. So, this officer politely said, if your driver's sleepy, just go ahead and get some rest or whatever, but, go ahead and go on your way. But it goes to show you that although we may think that things have changed, there are some things that have not. This is 2020. Why are we still dealing with those things? When I have a neighbor that's still flying the Confederate flag in their garage, but I see it every day. They may think that there's not any harm in it, but when you have institutions, NASCAR is saying, we don't want that. Mississippi is now looking to take that off of their state flag because when you have institutions, schools and things on this line where that's being flown and what that represents, that's not an environment that you want children growing up in. You want them growing up in an environment where they can feel like that they can achieve anything. in life. One of the things that I'm proud of as far as being a Tuskegee Airman is that any escort mission they went on, they never lost a single plane. That laid the groundwork, for me, later on down the road. 'Cause if it were not for those individuals really showing that African Americans were intelligent, African Americans were driven to do the best they can, and that African Americans could carry out a mission the way they did, I probably would not have been afforded the opportunities that I had. And that's something that I hope will be a lesson for those African Americans coming along now, that they need to understand that there are opportunities for them, but they need to learn and educate themselves on what those opportunities are. My father challenged me. He would say, paint this and I'll reward you accordingly. Or, he taught me about, financial responsibility and about hard work. Bought a lawnmower one time and pointed to my brother and I and said, you see that lawnmower out there? That's your allowance now. So he taught us about financial responsibility. And my whole thing is, if I can make a difference for one person each and every day, then I've left my legacy in this world.